So we can see this gray line here, right? This is the 25 level for the ADX, right? The gray line, the gray ADX. When the DI lines cross each other, right? So where this little rectangle is, right? We have the blue DI plus, right? Crossing above the DI minus in red. And we also need the ADX here. We need the ADX above the 25 level. All right, so that's our solid line right there. ADX above the 25 level. And actually, you know what? I thought it'd be good to make it solid, but it actually looks like an indicator plot. So yeah, let me just make it stand out. There we go. Okay, so there's our dashed 25 level there. So we need the ADX above the 25 level when our DI lines cross each other. And then as this, right, so that's basically two conditions in one. So then our third condition is that price must close above our trigger lines here. And let me just talk about the trigger lines real quick here. So these trigger lines that we have on the chart, those come from lizard indicators. So it is the AMA or AMA trigger lines. That's what we're using here for the trigger lines. So these trigger lines can be found on either Futures.io or on Laser Trader. So yeah, let me just bring this up. Yeah, so those trigger lines, I'm pretty sure the NinjaTrader 8 version is available on Futures.io. I know the Ninja 7 version is for sure, but I think I've seen the NT8 version on Futures.io. And to find them, let's see, I think I guess I would search the downloads area first, or you could just use the search box up here on Futures.io. So the second place to get them, although really I would say this should be the first place, because those AMA indicators come from Lizard Trader. So if you go to their website and you go to the free indicators, it is one of the free indicators sections here for members. So just like with Futures.io, you do have to have a membership in order to download indicators from their site. And it's the same thing for Lizard Trader. It's just a one-time membership. Actually, it says register for a free membership. I don't know. Maybe they changed their business model, but it was my understanding that the membership is a one-time fee, and then you can download all the free indicator sections there. Download them all, and when there's updates, you can download those updates for free as well. So, all right, so that's where this trigger line indicator comes from, and you'll find it in your Lizard Indicators folder here. So, all right, so that is our third condition there, right? So we need the DI lines to cross each other, we need the ADX line above 25, and we need the close above the trigger line, and that'll generate a long signal, right? So we should mark that for a long signal. There. All right, and so the opposite would be true for a short. So like over here, we have the red line crossing the blue, but the ADX line is below 25, so no setup there. Let's see if I can find a short. It's probably going to be hard to find in these markets. Here we go. Right, so we have the red line crossing the blue line, and our ADX is definitely well above the 25 level. So let's see, where does that occur? Yeah, there we go. That occurs on that bar. Yeah, so there we go. All right, two examples there. So there we go, some kind of a name here. All right, so the key, one of the first and easy kind of key first conditions, right, is our DI lines crossing each other. So let's start with something simple here. Let's grab a crossover solver. Connect that in. So we're looking for the DI plus to cross over the DI minus. All right, so input A, we'll set that to the DI plus. All right, so there is our DM indicator. And remember, if you're changing the period, to adjust the period, so I'm just using the 14 period on the chart. And so then let's select our DI or our plus DI. Yeah, plus DI plot there. Okay, so that's input A is the plus DI. Input B, that will be the negative DI. All right, so now we'll select the negative DI right there. Call it good. And we should have, there we go, all of these crossover signals now. Right, like so. There we go. And there's a whole bunch right there. Yeah. All right, now, second condition, make sure that ADX is above the 25 level. So to do that, we need the threshold solver, right? So the ADX plot needs to be above a 25 level threshold, or 25 threshold level. All right, so let's just call this the ADX 25. Yeah, we want the ADX greater than 25. All right, so for our input, again, let's select the DM indicator one more time. DM, and this time we want the ADX, and that's already selected for us. So we can just click OK. And so now we need to put in that 25 level. And so now the ADX is non-directional, right? It's just telling you the strength of the trend. And it doesn't matter if it's a downtrend or an uptrend, right? So this, in this strong downtrend, right, our ADX is going up. So for non-directional indicators, you want to generate a long output and a short output at the same time, right? Because you know, when the ADX is above 25, you don't know if that's for a long signal or a short signal. So you need both outputs. You need a long and a short output at the same time, right? And then when the ADX goes below 25, then there's no output. And this no output, right, zero output will prevent any signals from occurring when there's a crossover. So let's take a look here. Yeah, right here, perfect example, right? So we have a bunch of crossovers here, right? A bunch of DI line crossovers, but we can see that the ADX line dips below 25 for quite a while here, right? So now, if we combine these two together, right? So there's just the DI crossovers only, and now when we add in this ADX filter, there we go, right? A bunch of these crossovers disappeared over here and over here. And let's do that again. Let's disconnect this. There we go, right? So there's a long and a short and a short. Yeah, there's two longs and two shorts here. And those are going to disappear. There we go. So now we're only left with one long and one short. All right, so that's condition 1 and 2. And our third condition is we're going to compare, let's see here. Yeah, we're going to compare the closing price to the trigger lines. And yeah, so we have an interesting situation here. So sometimes, oh wait, no, okay, so the trigger lines are pointing down. So the slower trigger line is on top, right? When the trigger lines are sloping down. Let's see here. So this long signal, trigger lines were sloping down. All right, sloping down. And I need more data on my chart. All right, so what I'm checking to see is, here we go. Yeah, is if, let's do this. All right, so I'm checking to see if we get a long signal when the trigger lines are crossed up, and we do. Right, so when the trigger lines are crossed up, we need to compare the closing price to the faster trigger line. Right, so we've got two lines that we need to compare the bar close to, depending if the trigger lines are crossed up or crossed down. All right, well, so we're going to need a bunch of comparison solvers to get us going here. So let's start with, let's see, all right, so this is going to be the closing price compared to the, let's do the fast trigger line, and I'll just abbreviate that. All right, so input A, that's going to be the closing price of the bar. So there we go, that's the default, the close price. And so input B, that will be the trigger lines. So let's go grab the lizard indicator trigger lines. All right, and let's see. Oh, well, okay, yeah. Most people call it the fast line and the slow line, but we can see the plot names are trigger and trigger average. So the trigger is going to be the faster one. There. And actually, let me just pull up the indicator again. Yeah, and even in the indicator settings, yeah, they call it the fast trigger period and the average. Let's see, fast trigger and trigger average. Okay, yeah. So, but most people will call the average the slow line. So, all right. So back to our comparison solver. Let's see here. So we have the fast trigger line selected. So remember the fast one, if it's a down, it's going to be, right, the dashed one is the faster line. And yeah, let's see here. Let's expand this open here. There. So we can see if the bar closes above the fast line, right, we're getting a long output. And of course, if the closing price is below the fast line, we're getting a short output. So there we go. There's that one done for us. And so now I'm going to take a little shortcut, go to the Solvers tab, and I can make a copy of this comparison solver. So let's make a copy of it. And we're just going to make a subtle adjustment here so that it's looking at the slow. Actually, I guess I should probably call this the average to match the indicator, right? The average trigger line. And so now we just need to go into the trigger line indicator and select the average right there. All right, so there we go. Our solver is done. So now we can switch back to the Logic tab, go to our solver nodes, go to existing nodes, and there at the bottom, there is our closing price compared to the average trigger line. So let's click on that, drop it down below. We can connect it up and take a look. Yeah, so here we go. We have the close of the bar above the slower or the average trigger line, right, which is going to be on top here. Right. So, okay, so that's that. So now we need a mechanism to determine, which of these solvers do we use? Which comparison do we want? Are we supposed to be comparing the close to the average line, or the faster line, right? It's basically whichever line. Well, let's see. Actually, it's going to be, it's going to. What's going to determine that is whether it's a long signal or a short signal. So in this case, we have a long signal. So we would want to compare to the slower. Well, let's see here. Yeah, we'd want to compare to the slower. Let's see. Unless, yeah, so here's our example here. This is a possible long signal, but we need to compare the closing price to the average. Let's see. No, the faster trigger line. But back here, we're comparing to the average. So let's see here. Yeah, I think this is going to require either the if-then or the relational node. Let's see. Let me take a look at the relational node. Let's see. No, I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be the relational node. Yeah, so the relational node is more for fuzzy logic comparisons, and we're not using fuzzy logic in this case. So let's see. Yeah, so let's go with the if-then node. Yeah, let's see. Actually, all right, so yeah, the first thing I'm going to need is so the first if-then node, I'm going to use the first if-then node to switch between, these two comparison solvers here. I'm going to switch between them two. Actually, yeah, I think I'm going to need a bunch of if-then nodes. At this point, I'm just going to try some experimenting. That's basically the beauty of BloodHound, is to, you can just experiment very quickly with stuff. So let's see, I'm going to make myself another solver here, another comparison solver. There we go. Let's grab another one here. And this comparison solver is going to tell me whether the trigger lines are crossed down or crossed up. All right, so we're comparing the fast trigger line to the average trigger line. So input A, that'll be our fast trigger line. So let's go into the lizard indicators and down to the trigger lines. There we go, trigger lines. And when the faster line is selected for us already, call it good. Input B, same thing as go to lizard indicators, find our trigger line Here's our trigger lines. This time we're going to select the average trigger line. There. All right, so there we go, right? So this solver is just matching the trigger line output, right? If it's down, right, red, we get a short red output. And if the trigger lines are crossed up, then we get a long output. Simple enough. So, let's see. All right, so let's put that in there. And let's see what we get. Yeah, hold on. I wasn't sure if this is going to work. So normally, the way people want to use the if-then node is, right, you have one solver that's turning the if-then node, on or off, or you have one solver controlling the if-then node to switch between then or else, right? The then or else input connections to the output. And so to make one solver kind of the controlling solver here, then what we also need is, let's see here. Well, actually, hold on. Before I go that route, let me just double check something here. Yeah, okay. So actually, this does work. Yeah, I kind of hastily just was looking at my outputs here. So let me explain why this is working here. So I think this is right. Let me just check a few more points here. A few more data points. Yeah, okay. So what I want to draw your attention to is when the close of the bar is inside of the trigger lines, we're getting a long and a short at the same time. And so if the closing price is inside the trigger lines, obviously that is not, that violates the rules here, right, for this system. That violates the conditions here, right? So either the closing price needs to be above the trigger lines, if there's a long signal, or below the trigger lines if there's a close, right? But definitely not in the middle. So if we look at this, right, as long as the closing price is above, and this is a perfect example here. Yeah, this worked out perfectly right here because our trigger lines are crossed down and then they cross up. And we can see that as long as the closing price is above the trigger lines, all we get is a long output, right? We're getting a long output, and it doesn't matter if the trigger lines are crossed down or cross up. We're getting only, right, and yeah, let me emphasize, only a long output. And now we can see again over here, when the closing price goes inside the trigger lines, right, we're getting both a long and a short together, right? And then if we come over here, again, we have another good example to work with because we have the trigger lines crossed up and then they cross down. But when we look at the output here, all we see is a short only when the closing price is below the trigger lines, right? And it doesn't matter, right? So it's both if the closing price is below the slow trigger line or the fast trigger line, right? Because we have this little crossover here to give us both examples, or give us both cases here. Yeah, so let's go along. And then what we see over here is whenever that closing price is inside the trigger lines, we're getting a long and a short together. All right. So this is actually working correctly. The only thing we need to do now is we need to strip out, we need to remove the long and shorts together, right? So if there's a long and short together, we need to remove that from our output here. So let's see, to do that, yeah, we should be able to use the long and short modifier. And let's see, which mode do we want? I think we want, where is it? I think we want difference. There we go. Difference. I was looking for subtraction, but yeah, we want difference. And sorry, let's connect that up. There we go. There we go. There, difference. And so now from this long short modifier, we can see whenever there was, and let's see here. Let's see, absolute or yeah, so we need the mode on absolute. And actually, sorry. No, difference is going to make it more complicated. Product. There we go. Oh, well, no. Let's see here. Yeah, we're going to have to go back to difference. Yeah, we'll have to go back to difference. And then also, so what we need to do is, right, you'll notice that with the difference, we're now, right, so we removed the areas here. Let's get this marked up, right? So we can see the couple of bars that have both a long and short output. And let's get a couple more of these marked here. Yeah, let's get them all marked. So with our long short modifier, right, we removed those bars that had a long and short, but again, we're left with long and short. So to reduce, the current result, to reduce it back down or return it back to the long only and short only, we can just simply use an AND node. So if I connect this AND node in, right, and then connect our long short modifier in, there we go. So now we're back. Now we're at the output that we want to see. Right. So there. Let's see here. Yeah. So now, as long as the closing price is below the trigger lines, we get a short output, right? And short output, and it doesn't matter if the trigger lines are crossed up or crossed down, right? Same thing over here. As long as the closing price is above the trigger lines, and it doesn't matter if the trigger lines are crossed down or crossed up, we get a long output. And when the closing price is in between, right, we have no output, right? No output there. So we can now take this and connect it in here, and there is our final result. All right, so let's take a quick look here. Just make sure everything looks correct. Right, so we have our, let's shrink this down a little bit. So we have a DI crossover, the ADX is good, and price, right, the close is above the ADX line, or the trigger lines, right. The close is above the trigger lines. And same thing over here. Let's see, we have a DI cross, but the ADX, didn't quite make it. So yeah, you know what? Let's make a minor adjustment here. Something that will help us test this out is let's use a little trick for you guys. So I'm going to take an OR node, connect that in there, and then I'm going to grab another OR node, connect those two together, and take this AND node into the OR node. Right. And then I'm going to use the slider. So this is probably the most common use for these sliders, although they do have other uses only when you're using fuzzy logic, right? So just keep that in mind, only when you're using fuzzy logic. And yeah, I'll just set it to like 0.25. So I set the OR node down to 0.25, and what that allows me to do is I can now see these crossovers, right? There. So I can see this kind of partial output, right? It's only a quarter of an output, or 0.25 of an output, but there's no racing stripe, right? There's no signal. So that allows me to quickly look at BloodHound's output and go, oh yeah, there's a short crossover right there. And then I can verify everything else, right? And of course the ADX is below 25, so we know that was filtered out. And also the close of the bar was above the trigger lines as well. So I can use this. Yeah, here we go. So here's a bunch more crossovers. Yeah, that ADX is down below. Let's see here. All right, so this short cross down. The ADX looks good. I think the ADX was above the 25, but the close of the bar, right, the whole bar is above the trigger line. So there you go. So that one was filtered out. And let's see what we have here. Yeah, the ADX is below 25. Let's take a look at this one. Right, yeah, our closing price is below the trigger lines. That's good. Let's take a look here. The ADX is below 25. And, oh, what do we have here? Oh, right, we actually have this marked with our triangle. And, yeah, so we can see the close of the bar was inside the trigger lines. So it didn't close above the trigger lines. So there we go, filtered out. Let's see here. So we have this cross down. The ADX is good, but the bar closed inside the trigger lines. So filtered out. Here we go. Here's a bunch more crossovers of the DI, but our ADX is below 25. Yeah, on all three of them. And let's see what else we have. Here we go. Here's a whole bunch. But, yeah, that ADX is below 25. Yeah, we have just a bunch of consolidation here. So, yeah, ADX filtered out all those crossovers. Yeah, again, our ADX line is way below the 25. Yeah, all of these crossovers, the ADX is below 25. Here we go. All right, so we got two signals here. Oh, but yeah, we're basically at the beginning of the chart. We don't have the trigger lines. Let's see, where those, yeah, those trigger lines are disappeared, aren't plotting yet. So we're missing that. So, all right, but I think we checked enough data points here to determine that, yeah, this is working as expected. All right. Now, if you don't want to see those little crossovers there, for kind of, for verification, all you got to do is just take this AND node and connect it right back up to the result node again. So yeah, so there we go. So this OR node, let's zoom in there so we can read that. This OR node is the signal and the crossover, and this is the signal only. So, and let's further, let's further reduce this down here to simplify the logic. So let's see. So what we can do is, when you have one AND node connected into another AND node, it's the same logic as having just one AND node only, right? It's the same as having one AND node only. So what I can do is actually just connect that up there and connect that up there, and I can remove this now and then connect that into there. And so there, now I can kind of simplify all of this. All right, so there's our final product. Frank has a follow-up question here. He's saying, what's the reason for the single, or what's the reason for the OR node with only one input, a single input? Yeah, before the other OR node. Yeah, actually, I kind of just cruised through this very quickly. I did not explain why there's this extra OR node. And the reason why there's this extra OR node is because this OR node, if you look at the top, right, so when you select a node, the top one here, right, the slider, or this section on top, this is the slider for the one that's selected, right? And the ones down below, those are showing you what's connected into that, right? So this solver here, right, this comparison solver is what's connected into this OR node. And I can tell by the name here, right? DI plus, crossover, DI minus. Sorry, this is a crossover solver here, right? And so going back to this OR node, right? So when I click on this OR node, right, the name for it is on top and the slider for it is on top. And if we look down below, right, we can see, well, there's an OR node and another AND node, right? And that's this OR node with this AND node, right? Those are the two nodes connected in to this OR node, this last OR node, right? Those two are connected into it. And remember, so the trick was to reduce the output, of this crossover solver. Yeah. But I don't want to reduce the output of the actual crossover solver itself, right? If I reduce the output, if I adjust the slider up here, right, then basically the system breaks, right? Yeah, the system's going to break because I've reduced the output of this crossover solver. So to keep the system intact, what I do is I kind of front run it with an OR node. And so this OR node, I can reduce the output, as we can see with the slider, right? I have the output reduced of this OR node, right? Instead of it actually being the solver, right? So all the solvers need to have their full output going into the AND node in order for the signals to work correctly. So I just use this, the first OR node here is basically as a proxy here to reduce the output. So then going into this last OR node, I have a reduced output of the crossover solver. And so that way it doesn't affect the AND node, right? So yeah, so with that's basically it. All right, so there you go. Good follow-up question there.